Tartarus Station was not supposed to exist according to any official record in human space. If you searched the databases of the United Earth Government, you would find only a brief entry describing an abandoned mining facility orbiting a dying red dwarf star in the Kepler void where no one ever traveled, because there was nothing worth finding there. This was a lie, and everyone who needed to know understood exactly what kind of lie it was. Station was actually a hollowed-out asteroid 3 kilometers across that had been converted into the most feared military installation humanity had ever built. And it served as home to 40,000 of the deadliest soldiers in the known galaxy. They called themselves the Iron Wolves, and they were humanity's answer to a universe that did not care about peace or fairness or the innocent lives caught between warring empires. Admiral Mayra Vasquez had commanded Tartarus Station for 15 years, and in that time she had led her forces against pirates and slavers and hostile alien species who made the mistake of threatening human colonies on the frontier. She was 62 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen more death than most people could imagine. And she was known throughout the military as a woman who never bluffed and never showed mercy to those who harmed the innocent. Right now, she sat alone in her private quarters listening to her sister's final message for the 7th time while tears ran down her face. Myra, Elena's voice spoke from the recording. They are taking us, and I do not know what they want, but they are killing anyone who resists. Myra remembered the day 40 years ago when she and Elena had stood together on Earth's last great spaceport and prepared to go their separate ways into the stars. Elena had chosen Elysium because she believed humanity needed to prove it could live in peace. Myra had chosen Tartarus because she knew that peace only survived when someone stood ready to defend it with blood and fire. You protect the galaxy your way, Elena had said with a smile as she embraced her twin for what both of them feared might be the last time. And I will show them another path forward. Just promise me you will call if you ever need help. Myra had replied, I promise. Elena had whispered, and now the call had finally come. And Myra felt something ancient and terrible awakening in her chest. She wiped her eyes and stood up straight and pressed the button that connected her to the station-wide communication system. All personnel. Her voice echoed through every corridor and barracks and hangar bay across Tartarus Station. This is Admiral Vasquez speaking with an emergency announcement that will change everything you thought you knew about this day. She took a deep breath and continued. 12 hours ago, the Vraxian hegemony invaded Elysium 4, a peaceful human colony on the outer rim with no military presence and no means of self-defense. Murmurs began spreading through the ranks as soldiers stopped what they were doing and listened. The colony was home to 12,000 civilians, including scientists and farmers and families with young children. And according to the emergency beacon we received, the Vraxians are now holding these people as prisoners. Myra's voice grew harder with each word. Elysium 4 was founded by my family, and the colony's governor is my twin sister Elena, who chose a path of peace while I chose this path of war. She paused to let that sink in. Some of you might think this makes my judgment compromised, and you would be right to question whether personal feelings should influence military decisions. Her eyes narrowed as she stared at the communication console. But I want you to understand something about why we exist and what we are sworn to protect. Elysium was sacred because it represented everything we fight for. A place where humans could live without fear and raise children in peace and prove that we are more than just warriors and killers. The Vraxians looked at that world and saw weakness, and they decided to crush it because crushing peaceful things is what predators do when they think no one is watching. They were wrong about no one watching. We are watching, and we are coming for them. The cheers that erupted across Tartarus Station shook the very rock of the asteroid as 40,000 soldiers roared their fury at the aliens who had dared to touch a human. World Mirror allowed the noise to continue for several seconds before raising her hand for silence. All ships will launch within 3 hours. And we will use the Acheron drive to reach Elysium 4 within 18 hours of departure. She saw the shock on the faces of officers around her because the Acheron drive was supposed to be top secret, technology that only command staff knew about. But she no longer cared about secrets. Yes, we can cross that distance in 18 hours. And yes, the Vraxians have no idea this is possible. And yes, we are going to use that advantage to destroy every single one of them. Her voice dropped, too. A deadly whisper that somehow carried more weight than shouting. I want no prisoners except those who can provide intelligence about their fleet movements and home systems. I want no survivors to escape and warn their masters what is coming. I want the Vraxians to learn a lesson that will echo through their species for 1,000 generations. You do not touch our people. You do not take our worlds. You do not harm the innocent and walk away breathing. She straightened her uniform and made one final declaration. This is not a rescue mission. Soldiers, though we will rescue every human we can find still alive. This is a reckoning. The Vraxians captured what they thought was Earth's weakest colony, and now they are going to face its furious sister. All hands to battle stations. We launch in 3 hours. Dismissed. The connection ended and Mira turned to find her senior officers, already assembled behind her with determination burning in their eyes. Admiral, her second-in-command, Captain Rodriguez, spoke first. What are your orders regarding the civilian colonists? We save as many as we can, Myra replied. But our primary objective is to ensure that no Vraxian leaves the system alive to report what happened here. Understood. Rodriguez nodded. And what about the Vraxian homeworld? Should we begin planning a follow-up strike? Myra shook her head slowly. One step at a time, Captain. First we liberate my sister's world. And then we send a message to every hostile power in this galaxy about what happens when you threaten humanity's children. The message will be the burning wreckage of their fleet. The message will be their commander's body at my feet. The message will be understood by every species that watches. The stars and wonders whether humans are prey or predators. She walked toward the door and paused with her hand on the frame. Make no mistake about what we are about to do. This will not be a battle. This will be an execution. And when it is finished, the name Tartarus will mean the same thing in every alien language that it meant in ancient human mythology. A place of punishment for those who dared to anger the gods. She stepped through the door and headed toward the command bridge where her fleet awaited her orders behind her. The Iron Wolves began preparing for war and across the stars. The Vraxians continued their occupation of Elysium 4 without any understanding of the storm that was racing toward them through the darkness between galaxies. Commander Thesok slept peacefully that night in his captured command center, dreaming of the rewards he would receive for bringing 12,000 human slaves to the hegemony. He did not dream of fire. He did not dream of vengeance. He did not dream of the woman with gray hair and terrible eyes who was coming to teach him the true meaning of human fury, but he would learn. They all would learn, and the lesson would be written in Vraxian blood across the skies of Elysium 4. The stars above Elysium 4 burned bright and peaceful on the night. Everything changed forever, Governor Elena. Vasquez stood at her window, watching the twin moons rise over the endless fields of golden wheat that stretched to the horizon. And she smiled, because this was exactly the life she had dreamed of building when she left. Earth 40 years ago, Elysium 4 was humanity's garden world. A colony of 12,000 souls who had sworn to live in peace and harmony with the universe around them. And for 3 decades, they had kept that promise without fail. The colonists here were scientists and farmers, and teachers and families who wanted nothing more than to grow crops under alien suns and raise their children far from the wars and conflicts that had plagued humanity for so long. Elena was proud of what they had built together, and she believed with all her heart that peace was not weakness, but rather the greatest strength any civilization could possess. She was wrong about how the universe would see that choice. But she would not learn this truth until it was far too late across the galaxy and the dark spaces between stars. The Vraxian hegemony had been watching human expansion with hungry eyes for many years, and their scouts had identified Elysium 4 as the perfect first target. The Vraxians were reptilian predators who stood 8 feet tall with scales like armor and claws that could tear through metal. And they had conquered 17 species across 3 centuries of brutal expansion through the stars. High Commander Desok reviewed the intelligence reports on his flagship and laughed at what he read there because the humans on this world had no weapons, and no warships, and no orbital defenses of any kind. They call themselves pacifists, his intelligence officer explained with a sneer that showed rows of razor teeth. They have officially renounced all violence as part of their colonial charter, and they refuse to even keep weapons for self-defense. Desok could not believe such foolish creatures existed in a galaxy where only the strong survived. Then they deserve what is coming to them, he declared to his officers. We will take this world within a single rotation and harvest these soft creatures for the mining colonies, where they will serve the hegemony until they die. The subjugation fleet consisted of 12 warships carrying 10,000 Vraxian warriors, which was far more force than necessary for a colony without defenses. But Desok wanted to make an example that would echo across human space. They came without warning on a morning when the farmers were already in their fields and the children were walking to school. The first sign of danger was shadows falling across the wheat fields as massive alien warships descended through the clouds. And then came the sonic booms that shattered windows across every settlement. Elena was in her office when her communications officer burst through the door, screaming that unknown vessels were entering the atmosphere and refusing all hails. Get me a channel to anyone who will listen, Elena commanded as she ran toward the emergency broadcast center. We need to send a distress signal before they jam our systems. But she already knew in her heart that help was too far away and that whatever was coming could not be stopped by words alone. The Vraxian dropships touched down in every major settlement simultaneously, and armored warriors poured out with weapons blazing into the air to terrify the peaceful colonists into submission. Most of the people of Elysium 4 had never seen a weapon fired in anger, and the sound of plasma rifles and the sight of these massive reptilian creatures sent them running and screaming through the streets. Some tried to flee toward the wilderness beyond the settlements, hoping to hide until help arrived. The Vraxians made examples of them. Elena watched on her security monitors as Vraxian soldiers cut down 17 people who tried to run, and she felt something break inside her chest as she realized her people were going to die and she could not save them. Governor, her aide called out with terror, shaking his voice. Commander Desok is demanding your surrender, and he says he will execute 100 colonists every hour until you comply. Elena closed her eyes and thought of her sister Myra, who lived on the other side of human space, and she wondered if she would ever see her twin again. Prepare the emergency beacon, she said quietly. The dead man's call protocol. But Governor, that system is only supposed to activate if the colony faces total destruction. Look outside, Elena replied with grief heavy in her words. What do you call this? The aide nodded and rushed to activate the hidden transmitter. That would send a single compressed burst toward the nearest relay station before the Vraxians could detect and jam it. Elena picked up her personal communicator and recorded a message while plasma fire echoed outside her window. Myra, she spoke her sister's name like a prayer. They are taking us, and I do not know what they want, but they are killing anyone who resists, and I cannot stop them. She paused as an explosion rocked the building. Protect the children if you can. My dear sister, and know that I have always loved you even when we chose different paths through this life." The message was sent just seconds before Vraxian soldiers broke down her door and dragged her into the street. Commander Thesok stood before the gathered colonists in the central plaza as the sun set on Elysium 4's first day. "Under alien occupation, you belong to the hegemony now," he announced through translation devices that turned his hissing voice into human words. "Your peaceful ways have made you weak, and the weak exist only to serve the strong." He looked at Governor Elena Vasquez, who knelt before him with her hands bound and blood on her face from where a soldier had struck her. "You sent a message before we jammed your communications," he said, with amusement dripping from his voice. "We detected the transmission, but we let it go because I want your people to know what happened here." Elena looked up at him with defiance burning in her eyes. "I want them to come running," Thesok continued with a predator's grin. "I want them to see that humanity's peaceful colony fell in 6 hours without a single Vraxian casualty. And I want them to understand that resistance against the hegemony is utterly futile." He turned to his officers and laughed. "If this is humanity's best, then all their worlds will fall within a cycle." Elena said nothing because there was nothing left to say. But in her heart she held on to one small hope. She knew exactly where her message was going, and she knew exactly who would receive it. And unlike Commander Thesok, she understood that humanity was not one people, but many. Some humans chose peace, others chose war, and the Vraxians had just made themselves the target of humanity's most furious warrior far across the galaxy. Deep in the Kepler void, where dying stars cast shadows across ancient asteroids, a communication array received a compressed burst transmission. Red lights began flashing on today's nudge. "Command deck, carved from solid rock, Admiral." Myra Vasquez looked up from her tactical display as her communications officer announced an emergency priority message from Elysium IV. She pressed play and heard her sister's voice. And for the first time in 30 years, tears fell from her eyes. The tears lasted exactly 10 seconds, then they stopped. And something far more terrible took their place. Commander Thesok woke on the 3rd day of occupation, feeling pleased with how smoothly everything was proceeding on his newest conquest. The human colonists had proven even more docile than expected, lining up obediently for processing and offering no resistance, as Vraxian soldiers divided them into groups based on age and physical condition. The young and strong would go to the mining colonies, where they would work until their bodies broke. The old and weak would be disposed of because they had no value to the hegemony. The children would be separated from their parents and raised to serve Vraxian masters without any memory of the freedom they had once known. It was efficient and brutal, and exactly how the hegemony had conquered 17 species before these soft humans. Thesok had already sent half his fleet back to hegemony space, carrying the first shipment of processed slaves, leaving only 6 warships to maintain control of the system. His intelligence officers assured him this was more than sufficient because no human military force was within 40 light-years of Elysium 4. Response time from their nearest military outpost is calculated at 3 cycles minimum. His tactical officer reported during the morning briefing, "By the time they arrive, we will have processed the entire population and established permanent fortifications." "Excellent," Thesok replied with satisfaction. "These humans are even weaker than I imagined. I expected at least some attempt at rebellion by now. They truly believe in their philosophy of peace." The officer sneered. "They would rather die than raise a hand against us. Then they will get their wish." Thesok laughed. Eventually, he dismissed his officers and returned to reviewing the processing reports, never once looking up at the stars, where something impossible was happening. 300 million kilometers away, Space itself seemed to tear open as the Acheron drive deposited. Tartarus Station at the edge of the Elysium system, Admiral Myra Vasquez stood on the command bridge watching 32 warships pour from the station's hangars, like angry hornets from a disturbed nest. And she felt the cold satisfaction of a predator who has finally cornered her prey. All ships report ready for combat operations, Captain Rodriguez announced. The Vraxians have not detected our arrival. They won't detect us until we want them to. Myra replied, "What is the enemy disposition?" 6 warships in orbit around Elysium 4, multiple ground installations across the colony settlements, and approximately 5,000 Vraxian soldiers on the surface. And our people? Rodriguez checked his display with a grim expression. Thermal imaging shows large groups of humans concentrated in what appeared to be processing centers. Near each major settlement, processing centers. Myra repeated the words like they tasted of poison. They are preparing to ship our people to their slave colonies. Yes, Admiral. Myra stared at the tactical display showing the positions of every Vraxian ship and installation. Launch communication jammers around the planet. She ordered, "I want every signal blocked before we begin. No distress calls, no warnings, nothing gets out. Understood." Then target their patrol ships on the system's edge and destroy them quietly. Within hours, the Vraxian patrol vessels vanished from existence without ever knowing what killed them. The main fleet around Elysium 4 received no warnings because there were no survivors to send. The Admiral Vasquez moved her forces into position with patience and precision, placing her warships in a sphere around the planet that would allow no escape. When everything was ready, she opened a channel to her fleet. "All hands. This is the Admiral speaking. In a few minutes we will begin our attack on the Vraxian occupation force. And I want every one of you to understand exactly what we are fighting for. Those colonists down there chose peace because they believed the universe could be better than it is. They trusted that humanity would protect them if anything went wrong. They trusted us. Today we prove that trust was not misplaced. We will show no mercy to the creatures who took our people. We will burn their ships from the sky. We will hunt their soldiers through the streets. We will not stop until every Vraxian in this system is dead or in chains. For Elysium, for humanity, attack." The first Vraxian warship exploded without any warning as missiles slammed into its reactor core from 6 different directions. The bridge crew died instantly, never knowing their killers had been watching them for hours. The second ship tried to raise shields and found them already overloaded by electronic warfare systems they had never encountered before. It lasted 12 seconds longer than the first commander. Desok was in the middle of his morning meal when alarms began screaming throughout his command center. "What is happening?" He roared at his officers, who scrambled to make sense of the chaos on their screens. "Human warships." Someone shouted. "Multiple contacts. They came from nowhere." "That is impossible. How did they get here so fast?" No one could answer because no one understood the technology that had carried death across light years in mere horse. Desok watched in disbelief as his fleet was systematically destroyed by an enemy that fought with terrifying efficiency. The humans did not give the Vraxians time to organize or respond. They did not accept surrender signals. They did not hesitate or show any mercy ship. After ship vanished from Desok's tactical display until only his flagship remained, crippled and drifting after precision strikes destroyed its engines. "They are not trying to destroy us," his tactical officer realized with horror in his voice. "They disabled us on purpose. Why would they do that?" Desok demanded the answer. Came from the proximity alarms that suddenly filled the bridge with screaming warnings. "Boarding pods," someone shouted. "Dozens of them. They are breaching the hull." Desok grabbed his plasma blade and prepared to fight. He was a warrior of the hegemony who had killed hundreds of enemies across a dozen conquered worlds. He was not afraid of soft. Humans who could not even defend their own colonies. He would teach them the price of challenging Vraxian superiority. The first boarding pod tore through the hull 30 meters from his position, and armored figures in black began pouring into his ship. They moved with speed that seemed impossible for their size. They fired weapons with accuracy that left no room for survival. They did not speak or taunt or waste time with threats. They simply killed the sock, listened to the sounds of combat echoing through his ship, and for the first time in his long career, he felt something cold settling in his chest. It took him several moments to recognize the feeling because he had never experienced it before. It was fear, real fear. The kind of fear that prey animals feel when they realize the predator has found them. The bulkhead door to his command center began glowing red as cutting tools burned through from the other side. Thesek looked around at his remaining officers and saw the same fear reflected in their eyes. "Stand ready," he ordered. "We will die as warriors of the hegemony." But even as he spoke the words, he knew they were hollow. These humans were not the weak prey he had captured 3 days ago. These humans were something else entirely, something terrible, something that had come for revenge, and nothing in the galaxy was going to stop them. The door to Commander Thesok's command center fell inward with a crash that echoed through the smoke-filled corridor. Vraxian warriors raised their weapons and fired at the opening, filling the air with plasma bolts that should have killed anything trying to enter. They hit nothing but shadows. The humans came through the breach like ghosts, made of black armor and cold fury, moving between the plasma bolts with speed that made the Vraxian eyes struggle to track them. 3 Vraxian officers fell before anyone understood what was happening. 2 more dropped. As they tried to retreat toward the rear exit, the remaining warriors formed a protective circle around Thesok and prepared for their final stand. They were the elite of the hegemony, veterans of 17 conquered worlds, and they would not die easily. The human soldiers stopped advancing and held their positions at the edges of the room for a long moment. Silence filled the space between predators. Then a single figure walked through the breach with slow, deliberate steps that showed no fear at all. Admiral Myra Vasquez removed her helmet as she entered the command center, and Thesok saw her face for the first time. She was smaller than he expected, barely reaching his chest and height, with gray hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of decades of hard experience. But it was her eyes that made him take a step backward without meaning to. Those eyes held something he had never seen in human faces before. They held the cold, patient hunger of a Payam's predator who has waited a very long time for this moment. "Commander Thesok." She spoke his name like a death sentence. "You are the one who captured Elysium 4. It was not a question. I am High Commander Thesok of the Vraxian hegemony," he replied with as much dignity as he could manage. "And you are making a grave mistake if you think you can attack our territory without consequences." Territory. Myra repeated the word with something like amusement. "You captured 12,000 civilians who never raised a weapon against anyone, and you dare speak to me about territory?" "They were weak," Thesok growled. "The weak exist to serve the strong. This is the law of the universe that every species must accept." Myra nodded slowly, as if considering his words. "You are right about one thing," she said. "There is a law that governs the universe." She took another step forward. "But you misunderstand what that law actually says. The weak do not exist to serve the strong. The weak exist because the strong choose to protect them. And you just attacked the people I swore to protect." Thesok raised his plasma blade and pointed it at her. "Stay back, human. I will kill you where you stand if you come any closer." "No." Myra shook her head. "You will not." She gestured to her soldiers, who raised their weapons but did not fire. "I did not come here to fight your warriors, Commander. I came here for you specifically. Your crew is already dead or captured throughout this ship. Your fleet is burning debris in orbit around the planet. Your soldiers on the ground are being hunted through the streets by my forces. There is nothing left of your conquest except you." Thesok felt his scales flush with rage at her calm certainty. "You think you have won?" He snarled. "The hegemony will send 100 fleets to avenge what you have done here. They will burn every human world until nothing remains of your species." "Perhaps," Myra acknowledged. "Or perhaps they will watch the recordings we send them and decide that humanity is not worth the cost." She took another step forward. "Either way, you will not be alive to see what they choose." Thesok lunged at her with all the speed his warrior body could produce. Bringing his plasma blade down in an arc that should have split her skull, Myra moved. One moment she was standing directly in his path. The next moment she was beside him, and his arm was bent at an angle that Vraxian bones were never meant to achieve. The plasma blade clattered to the floor. Thesok screamed as pain shot through his body. And then he was on his knees with the human standing over him like an ancient goddess of death. "How?" he gasped through the agony. "You are so small. You should not be able to." "You thought size was everything," Myra interrupted. "You thought scales and claws made you superior. The humans have been killing things bigger than us since we first climbed down from the trees. We killed predators with rocks and sharpened sticks. We killed each other with weapons so terrible that we nearly destroyed our own world. And we did all of this before we ever reached the stars." She grabbed his head and forced him to look into her eyes. "You are not a predator, Commander. You are not even particularly dangerous by the standards of the universe. You are just another bully who mistook kindness for weakness. And now you are going to pay for that mistake." The doors at the far end of the command center opened, and Myra's soldiers brought in a single prisoner. Governor Elena Vasquez was bruised and bleeding but alive. And when she saw her sister standing over the fallen Vraxian commander, tears began streaming down her face. "Myra," she whispered. "You came." "Of course I came," Myra replied without looking away from Thesok. "Did you really think I would let anyone take you from me?" She released the commander and walked toward her sister, embracing her gently as if she might break. "I am so sorry I could not come faster," she murmured into Elena's hair. "I am so sorry this happened to your people." "You came," Elena repeated. "That is all that matters." They held each other for a long moment while Thesok watched from the floor with something like confusion on his reptilian face. He did not understand why the terrifying warrior suddenly seemed so gentle. He did not understand why the soft colonist seemed so unbroken despite everything she had endured. He did not understand humans at all. "What happens now?" Elena finally asked, pulling back to look at her. Twin Myra glanced at the fallen commander and then back at her sister. "Now we finish what they started. We liberate your people. We heal what can be healed. And we send a message to every hostile power in this galaxy about what happens when you threaten humanity's children." She turned back to Thesok, who was being dragged to his feet by her soldiers. "You wanted to make an example of Elysium. Commander, congratulations. You succeeded beyond your wildest dreams, just not in the way you intended." She nodded to her soldiers, who bound the commander's arms and prepared him for transport, taken to the brig. "He's going to help us deliver our message to his masters. And then the Vraxian hegemony is going to learn what humanity really means when we say the word family." Elena watched her sister give orders with the easy authority of someone who had commanded armies for decades. And she felt something she had not expected to feel in the aftermath of so much horror. She felt hope because the universe was dark and full of predators, but humanity had predators of its own, and they protected their own with a fury that no alien empire could ever truly understand. The liberation of Elysium 4 took 3 more days as the Iron Wolves hunted down every Vraxian soldier who had hidden when the invasion began. Some tried to surrender when they realized their fleet was destroyed, and no rescue was coming. The humans accepted their surrender and treated them as prisoners according to the laws of war. Others tried to take hostages or threaten the colonists they had been guarding. Those Vraxians did not survive long enough to regret their choices. Admiral Mira Vasquez personally oversaw the search for survivors throughout every settlement, walking through the processing centers where her sister's people had been held, like animals waiting for slaughter. Of the 12,000 colonists who had lived on Elysium 4 before the invasion, 11,342 were found alive. The rest had been killed during the initial assault, or had died during the 3 days of occupation from violence or neglect or simple despair. Each death was recorded and each name was added to a list that would be sent to the Vraxian hegemony along with the other messages. Myra was preparing. Governor Elena Vasquez stood beside her sister as medical teams from Tartarus Station treated the wounded and psychological support specialists began the long work of helping people recover from what they had endured. They were so scared, Elena said quietly as she watched children being reunited with parents who had been separated during processing. They did not understand why anyone would want to hurt them. That innocence is not a weakness, Myra replied. It is a gift that you gave them by building this world the way you did. But it almost got them killed. No. Myra shook her head firmly. What almost got them killed was a universe that has too many predators and not enough protectors. That is why I exist. That is why Tartarus exists. We are the wall between the darkness and the light. And as long as we stand, worlds like Elysium can keep shining. Elena looked at her twin with new eyes. For 40 years, she had thought of Myra as someone who had chosen violence over peace, war over harmony, destruction over creation. Now she understood that her sister had chosen something far more difficult. She had chosen to carry the weight of humanity's fury so that others would not have to. What happens now? Elena asked. Will the Vraxians come back with more ships? That depends on how well they receive the message I am about to send them. Mira turned and walked toward the spaceport where a single ship was being prepared for a very special mission. The ship was the captured Vraxian flagship, now crewed by a skeleton team of Iron Wolves who would pilot it back to hegemony space. Its cargo holds were filled with the bodies of every Vraxian who had died during the liberation. Nearly 5,000 corpses arranged with terrible precision, and in the ship's communication systems was a message that would be broadcast on every frequency as soon as the vessel entered hegemony territory. Mira had recorded it herself on the bridge of her command ship while looking directly into the camera with eyes that held no mercy and no doubt. To the rulers and people of the Vraxian hegemony, her recorded voice began. I am Admiral Myra Vasquez of the Human First Expeditionary Legion, and I am returning your dead. 3 days ago, your commander, Thesok, invaded a peaceful human colony called Elysium 4 because he believed it was weak and defenseless. He was correct that Elysium had no weapons and no warships. He was wrong about what that meant. Elysium was not undefended. Elysium was protected by me. The recording showed footage of the battle. Vraxian ships exploding in orbit. Vraxian soldiers falling before human assault teams. Commander Dezak on his knees before the Admiral. We destroyed your entire fleet in less than 6 hours. We killed or captured every soldier you sent. We liberated every human colonist who was still alive. And we did all of this without losing a single ship. Myra's face filled the screen again with cold fury burning in her eyes. I want you to understand something about humanity that Commander Thesok failed to grasp. We are not one people. We are many peoples with many ways of living and many beliefs about how the universe should work. Some of us choose peace because we believe that is the highest calling any soul can pursue. Others choose war because we know that peace only survives when someone stands ready to defend it. Both paths are valid. Both paths are human. And when you threaten any human anywhere in this galaxy, you are threatening all of us. The recording showed the list of 658 colonists who had died during the occupation. Names scrolling past in an endless stream of loss. These are the names of the people your commander killed. They were scientists and farmers and teachers, and children who wanted nothing but to live in peace. They are dead because you believed humanity was weak. They are dead because you believed you could take what you wanted without consequences. You were wrong. Myra's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than shouting. The ship carrying your dead will arrive in your space within one standard cycle. When it arrives, I want you to count the bodies. I want you to calculate how many warriors you lost. And I want you to understand that for every human life you take, we will repay you tenfold. This is not a threat. It is a promise. If you ever touch our people again, we will not stop at your fleets. We will come to your worlds. We will find your leaders. And we will teach you why humanity has never been conquered by anyone. The recording ended with the Perstis seal of the 1st Expeditionary Legion and a single phrase. In both human and Radzian script, you have been warned. 1 year later, Admiral Mira Vasquez returned to Elysium 4 for the dedication of a memorial to those who had died during the occupation. The colony had rebuilt with remarkable speed, and new settlers had arrived from across human space to join the community that had survived the darkest days of its history. Governor Elena Vasquez stood at the memorial with her sister as the names of the dead were read aloud and flowers were placed at the base of a statue showing humans of all ages standing together with their hands joined. The Vraxians reclassified humanity after they received your message, Elena said. They changed us from conquest target to do not engage under any circumstances. I heard, Myra replied. Several other hostile species did the same thing after our intelligence services made sure they saw the footage. Do you think we are safe now? Mira watched children playing in the gardens beyond the memorial, their laughter carrying on the wind like proof that hope could survive anything. No, she answered honestly. The galaxy is too big and too dangerous for any of us to ever be truly safe. But they know what we are now. They know that humanity's peaceful worlds are not weak. They are just protected by their sisters who chose a different path. Elena took her twin's hand and held it tight. Thank you for coming when I called. Always, Mira promised. That is what family is for. Above them, the stars were shining bright and cold. And somewhere out in the darkness, other predators were watching and learning, and deciding that perhaps humanity was not prey after all. Perhaps humanity was something far more dangerous. Perhaps humanity was family, and families protected their own no matter what it cost, no matter how far they had to travel, no matter how many enemies stood in their way. That was the message that echoed across the galaxy in the years that followed. That was the message that kept human colonies safe from those who might otherwise have tried to take what was not theirs. That was the message that Commander Thesok had helped deliver, even though he spent the rest of his life in a human prison cell, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not divided. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was a family with many faces and many paths, and one absolute unbreakable rule: hurt one of us face all of us. And the galaxy finally understood what that truly meant.